name is Harold Davis. I'm here to teach you about the art and craft of digital photography.
Harold Davis is a best-selling author of many books, including his latest Creative Garden Photography from Rocky Nook, which can now be pre-ordered. Harold is the developer of a unique technique for photographing flowers for transparency, the creator of multi-raw processing and hand HDR processing. He is a Moab master and a Zeiss ambassador. Harold is an internationally known photographer and a sought-after workshop leader. His website is digitalfieldguide.com. Now I'm going to hand it over to Harold.
So hi, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday morning iPhone extravaganza. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm going to do this in three stages. First, I'm going to show a bunch of my iPhone images, talk a little about the tools I use to make them, and talk about what they are. And hopefully we'll have some fun along the way. I start out with most of the jokes. At some point, and you can kind of put in the chat when, I'm going to break and actually go to my iPhone, which we have plugged in as a alternative panelist. So we're going to see how that works. And I will actually show using some of the tools and techniques that I use on my iPhone. In the process of doing this, we'll also talk about my iPhone workflow. And I really, with that said, I'm going to share my screen and get started. Here we go. There, can everybody see my screen? Looking good. I think, right? The only thing that I really want to say as a preface is that I'm a resolutely Luddite high-tech guy. So I kind of like to be in control of my own aesthetics, and that goes for iPhone photography and iconography, as well as for work with my larger big boy camera. So as I was just texting privately with one of the people on this participant, Greg, I go by the Arthur Weasley principle from Harry Potter, and that is never trust anything magical if you don't know where it keeps its brain. So in the realm of art, I am not a huge fan of artificial intelligence algorithms and things that are going to decide for me what my final image should look like. I want to decide. Another preparatory remark is that I have been very delighted over the last few years to find a market for my iPhone images, both as licensed images and as prints. And this has been really exciting for me. I'm not going to say it's the majority of what I do, but it's ended up being a fairly substantial part. Recently, we sold an iPhone image, for example, to a hotel chain for I think it was 35 different instances of it. I think I have the image in the slideshow, and I'll point it out. What is the case is that I may have just knocked artificial intelligence, but AI interpolation methods have become a whole lot better in the last few years. That means you can blow an image up perhaps 600% before you start to see any real deterioration. And if we have time during this webinar, I'll talk about the tool AI Gigapixel that I use to do that. So ultimately, if you're submitting a fairly high resolution file, whether it's a JPEG or a TIFF or a PSD, and the end user doesn't know what camera made it particularly, they just see that this is a fairly high resolution file, the issue of whether it came from an iPhone or a regular camera is irrelevant, circular, muddy, something like that. Anyhow, it doesn't matter so much. Interestingly, while I'm on that topic, you should keep in mind that it's possible to round trip photos from your iPhone to your computer with Photoshop and then round trip them back to the iPhone. You can use an image that you made with a DSLR or mirrorless on your iPhone and use the iPhone apps to extend creativity to it. The easiest way to do that, there are others, is to use email to get that image back to your iPhone. Conversely, if you want to do some retouching in Photoshop and then get it back on the iPhone, it's easy enough to do that as well. Of course, you could just do the retouching on the iPhone, but I find that my ability to work with a thumb and forefinger interface is a little bit limited. In any case, here we are with a selfie shadow. Many of us have taken them. This has the distinction for me of being my very first iPhone image. So this is where I started, on the mean streets taking a shadow, and this was with, I believe, my first iPhone, an iPhone 3, and it would have been probably 10 years ago. And, you know, I use my iPhone to kind of photograph weird things. This mannequin sculpture found in a hotel room lobby that I wouldn't bother really pulling out the camera and tripod and doing it. But sometimes the things you wouldn't bother with turn out to be interesting. This sculpture in the lobby of the very upscale Hotel Lutetia in Paris was positioned at the front desk, basically. So this is what the people greeting customers saw. And you know, again, with these aliens landing somewhere in a small town in Germany, I probably would not have bothered to pull out my camera and tripod for this. But walking along with the iPhone, it becomes an image that's a heck of a lot of fun. Phyllis, I should say that, you know, if you want to stop me with questions, please do at some point. I'm very open to that.
Okay, yeah. Everyone can put questions into the chat and we'll answer them as we go along.
Hot dog. And yeah, kicking up one's feet. This was like the first time I took the iPhone out in the field in Yosemite, and it struck me as, okay, it's pretty funny. You have this mobile home truck thing, and there's a summer view, and behind it you can see the piles of snow. And what happens when you have not a through tree? I wouldn't want to drive through the tree. So you're going to see some stupid signs coming up. My dad took a look at my photo stream at some point, and God help one when your father looks at your photo stream, and he says to me, Harold, stop it with the silly signs already. So when do you get to art? Artwork is coming soon. So my principle is that photography is 3/4 two-dimensional design. So then design schmuck. And here's a lobstrosity conquering a Maine restaurant. If you've ever driven up the mid-coast Maine, which is a wonderful thing to do, you'll pass this restaurant with the lobster conquering it. And which way is one way? Sideways, perhaps. And, you know, I can say what I want, but only in this small area full of weeds near here. In Finisterre, in Spanish Fistera, the last stop on the Camino de Santiago, after about 30 kilometers beyond Santiago, at the edge of the ocean, where one of the traditions is to throw your boot into the ocean or burn it if you can on the beach. And here's the last stamp for your pilgrim passport. Ultimo Cello. Here's something that's in short supply these days: free hugs. Along the Camino, of course. And in our neighborhood for Christmas, even the pink flamingos get dressed up. I found this dog in somebody's house in rural Romania, and this was in the neighborhood here. Somebody dressed up a redwood tree. Unfortunately, the tree is since deceased, but it became a hobbit hole, I guess. demon in a Vietnam near the Thai border. Is it Paris Street art or Paris Street tart? I leave that to you. And in France, they rightfully have a thing about pigs. Here are a couple of pigs in a farm, one living, one not so living, and none of the pigs in this photo are living. A local store. I don't know, this dog, he's just struck me as pretty funny. If you can't read the writing in the back of this one, it's the Hotel Castle Dracula. And, the people in the outbound tourist industry in Romania, courtesy of whom I was there, are pretty unhappy about the Disneyization of Count Dracula, but I thought it was hilarious. And in our neighborhood a couple of months ago, this is a socially distancing deer. Okay, so back to the early days with the iPhone. One of the things I found that was really fun with it is you can photograph hotel room bathrooms and mirrors and not have to worry about, well, let me get out the whole tripod, or lighthouse lights like this. Notice that almost all of these images are processed. Part of my rule on that for myself is mostly I do process them on the iPhone. This one is primarily processed with Waterlogue, which is one of the apps I want to show you. Another thing I like to do with my iPhone is to create images where it's not entirely clear what is being photographed. So this is in a fancy library, and these are the sides of books here, primarily processed in Snapseed. See the Snapseed framing around it, and a detail. So you can take your iPhone in and make photos in places where you probably wouldn't be able to otherwise, like this jewel of a Romanian box. This is about as close to a fairly unmanipulated iPhone image as I'm going to get, but it was touched up and enhanced a little in Snapseed. Playing with scale, this is a maquette of an opera set. It's not a real big scale image. And in a Costco parking lot, a refraction with a line crossing it. This is a kid's skull toy. Echoes back to you what you say to it, and the lights light up, sitting in our living room at Halloween time. Flowers. This is a ceiling in Romania, and looking down a set of stairs in a hotel somewhere. This is a downtown Palermo, Italy, Sicily, where I was wandering around with camera and tripod and, of course, iPhone. And something like this, perhaps I could have just said, okay, and brought out the camera and tripod and spent some time. But you know what? The light might have gone by the time I did that. Anyhow, it's my sketchbook. Here's Monet's bedroom, his bed in Giverny. And this is Shay, Harold, Phyllis, Julian, Nicholas, Matthew, and Katie Rose, our front stairs and front porch here in Berkeley. Processed in Waterlogue and Image Blender. A hotel room. I've had the experience with these hotel room photographs. This was an old, basically, manor that, through a set of circumstances, I was staying in rural Galicia in Spain. And the thing is that sometimes what I will do is I'll take an iPhone shot. I'll say that's interesting. Then I'll pull out the camera and the big tripod and take photos. And often the iPhone is actually the better of the two. You can catch quality with it that it can be hard to capture with a big camera. That was very much the case with this attic image from Maine. I'm not going to say it's Stephen King territory, but every summer Maine Media Workshops has put me up in this apartment with a coastal view. And I noticed last time I was there, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be there this August because they've all been canceled. But I noticed last time I was there that there was this flight of stairs with a door that wasn't locked going up to a weird attic. So I took this picture with my iPhone up there because the iPhone is the camera you always have with you. And then I said, well, let me do it with the big camera and tripod. And I came back up with the big camera and tripod. Never as good as the iPhone shot in this case. So there you have it. And here's a iPhone photograph of a room in Bourg, France, with the Cathedral of Bourg out the window. A breakfast dining room in a B&B in France. Somebody's tattoo, I think, on the ferry in Malta. The thing is that, okay, it's pretty fast and easy to do this kind of thing with an iPhone, and nobody ever thinks twice about it. And melons, bread. I like the idea of patterned lines, and so here this was in a truck stop in Portugal, and the napkin holder echoes the lines of the tablecloth thing, the table runner. But you can get that by holding your iPhone down and angling it without doing much else. Patterns of floor in a hotel lobby and in a hotel hallway. So we're going to have a few food shots here. So I stayed in Auvers-sur-Oise, which is notable. It's sort of an extended suburb of Paris, and it's notable as the place where Vincent van Gogh did his last paintings, lived the last years of his life, and at least apparently committed suicide, although the question of how much it was suicide is now controversial. In any case, the place I booked myself into was this rather wonderful restaurant that turned out to be a place where people from Paris did rendezvous getaways with people who may or may not have been their spouses. And to go with that, they had wonderful sensuous dinners, of which I had this dessert. This is a plate of fugu, the poisonous fish in Japan, and my host there brought me to this restaurant in Kyoto and fed me a wonderful meal. And I ate some of this stuff, and she said, "You know, that was fugu." I said, "What?" She said, "You know, the poison fish, puffer fish." And so, you know, it turns out if the chefs don't know what they're doing and feed you the wrong part of it, you can keel over from a paralytic poisoning almost immediately. What's also the case is that there's a certain cult of saying, well, let's just get a little bit of that sense of paralysis for the thrill. So in any case, I said, well, that's great, but I didn't photograph it. She said, well, I'll order you another plate. You can photograph it so long as you eat it. So I did, and here it is. And of course, when you travel in Japan, everything you get for breakfast is nicely arranged, even if it's just a couple of grapes. So here's the whole genre of glass photos. This one is the Eye of Sauron in his cups, the sun coming through a glass of red wine in northern Italy somewhere, I think. And the thing is that when you're traveling a lot and spend a lot of time on your own, iPhones are great for this kind of thing. This was a party in Germany the day Germany won the the football cup, whatever that's called, and the Super Bowl of soccer. So anyhow, while everyone was consuming what's in the cup, I was more interested in lining them up and photographing them. And walking along the Camino de Santiago in the evening, again, I would sort of say, okay, here's the world, a tree, and a glass of red wine. So the consequences of all this drinking, here's somebody who met a Sari and according to his tombstone, in rural Transylvania and Romania, where part of what they do is they make these grave markers that do something notable about a person's life. And pretty obviously, this person was a bartender or wasn't too happy about the drinking. And here's another consequence of indulging. That's a statue of Bacchus. And you see how things are a little bit blurry around the edges. And this is more, this cup is more an organized cross. Here we go with a nice blue composition of bottles. And spoonerismo, spoons reflected and refracted in a stainless steel milk pitcher back there. And a stack of plates. Selfies at the crack of doom. There I am with my wig, or with a fisheye lens. There's my son Matthew about 10 years ago, right, Phyllis?
Yep, I think so.
In his karate outfit. And there they are, I would say, 8, 9 years ago, the three younger ones.
Absolutely. The guy on top of the cart, he has just graduated high school, and he's starting his first class at UC Santa Cruz today.
Distance learning, I should add, which is
absolutely
very interesting.
Yep.
We won't say who that is. Fear of being a victim of.
It's the Eye of Phyllis.
It's the Eye of Phyllis. So would you take these with a big camera? Probably not. The best camera to use is the one you have with you.
Harold, there's a question about that image that you just had up.
This one?
Not Matthew, the breakfast room. There you go. What app did you use for the breakfast room? It has a lovely blur and a dreamy look.
Well, it's a good question. I think primarily Snapseed. I think I also use Plastic Bullet to add the blur. And yeah, the dreamy breakfast look. Wait till you tasted the croissants there. Yes, I think we all take airplane selfies when we fly. My family, the ones I showed you and Phyllis, aren't going to let me get on an airplane until there's a vaccine or a cure. Am I right, Phyllis?
That is exactly right.
But so so to speak, my wings are clipped.
You're grounded.
I'm grounded. But there's Mount Fuji under there. And a staircase in Tokyo. Pagoda in Nara, Japan, the old imperial capital. This is a place I stayed in the mountains of Japan. This is an app called Lomob that does the sort of antiquing up there, you see. It's out a bus window in Rabat, Morocco in the rain. Out our car window in the rain here in Berkeley. Rain on the ferry to from Naples to Capri, I think. Rain in rural Vietnam. Rain in Milan, Italy. You can take an iPhone out in a rain. It's really pretty straightforward. I think a few more images and then I'll go over to my iPhone. Does that sound good, Phyllis?
That sounds great, Harold.
So Luxembourg Gardens here in Paris. The Parc de Sceaux, another André Lenotte designed formal garden in France. Low mob again with the background of this Eiffel Tower. This is a waterlogue image of, primarily a waterlogue image of Claude Monet's wonderful house in Giverny. And another Giverny image. The Mas de Garrigue in the southwest of France, where it's my hope to return when my wings have been unclipped with a group. We were all booked in there, you know, in April. It's not fair. Yeah, so a night image with the iPhone below the Eiffel Tower. The Arc de Triomphe.
Oh, there's a question about an image, Harold.
Which one, dear?
The Vietnam one. It said, Judy asks, how did you get that shiny surface on the Vietnam image?
Yeah, that's a oil painting filter, and I forget the name of the app, but when I get my iPhone up, I can verify what the name is. When did I head over to it? I see there's a request to start my video on it. Let's see. I showed zooming in the camera app, and probably this is something most people know how to do, but you pinch it and then you pull the zoom lever. I also showed overexposing by telling it to do a dark item, or underexposing by telling it to do a light item. And then you could make two different exposures and combine them manually. I'll show you how to combine them manually in a minute. I also showed Pro Camera, which has a dial that lets you go plus EV. So here we are plus 4 EV, and here we are minus however many EV. So this really looks like a real camera, and here you just set everything with a dial. So this is an exposure compensation thing. If I wanted to make two exposures, one at minus 3 EV, I'd go like that, lunk, and then I would go plus 3 EV for a plus 3 EV one, and I go like that. So this gives you a lot of control over the exposure, which is very cool. What do I do with those exposures? Well, as it happens, I have a canned example or two. So going into my into the canned example, if you look at this, here's a one that's minus 2 EV. I made it in exactly the way I showed you with Pro Camera. Here's one that's plus 2 EV. And I can go into an app like True HDR, and I can choose my pictures. And I got to pick the right album here. And so here I go. I pick this one, and I pick this one, and I can merge them. Okay, then I've got some controls. I can make them a little brighter. And actually on my iPhone, this looks really good. It looks a little less so on here, but you get the idea. So you can really do full HDR controlling of exposures this way. Let me show you one of my favorite apps, which is Waterlogue. It creates a watercolor-like effect from almost everybody. Before I get there and answer the question, no tripod. You know, I'm a very careful photographer with my big boy camera. And I'm probably often going to use a tripod even in situations where maybe I don't have to. But with this little thing that's in my pocket, I am just not going to do that. The point of it is to have fun. No tripods. Waterlogue. So let's see. Let's pick a nice image to do a watercolor of. What about, oh, I don't know. What about uh, this one? So that's a pretty nice watercolor. You can choose different styles from it. You can give it a border here. And actually, I think that's best. That was the Travelogue style in the Waterlogue app. So when you're happy with it, you can export it back to Photos. And one thing that I often do, so I have on the right side of Image Blender, it overcame its, yeah, Lomob has some issues with current versions of things. It's not high on my list of recommended apps in point of fact at this point. Most of what you can do in it, you can do in Snapseed, and we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, let's see. We want webinar, and we want this one. So what I have here is I have the version of this that I did in Waterlogue on the right, and the version of the original version out of the iPhone camera on the left. And if I have it here, it's 100% just original shot. If I have it here, it's 50%. And if I have it here, it's all Waterlogue.
So you're moving your finger at the bottom of the slider there, right?
I am moving my finger at the bottom of the slider. That's right. I realize you can't see my finger. So what I usually do is something about, but at the bottom there's a slider, and the slider says which percentage of the original and which percentage of the manipulated image you put in. You can get fancier with it. This is called Image Blender. In answer to the question of which app blends. You can get fancier with it using blending modes, but I generally keep this normal and use it at about 50%. I'm going to run through what you would do is you save to Photos and start over on a clean project. I'm going to run through another example of this with Waterlogue because I think that would probably be helpful.
Also, just so everyone knows, we will be eventually getting this up on YouTube. So if there's something you can't see, or if it's going too fast for you, you can review it when it gets to YouTube.
And let me also say that there's a lot more there are a lot more apps that I use than we're going to be able to cover today. And some of them are in fact on the page that's up there. Phyllis is not going to list all of them in an email because there are too many. But if there's interest, I will happily do a second one explaining how to use Hipstamatic, Distressed FX, Prisma, Photolab, Leonardo, Mextures, Mobile Monet, Glaze, Auto Painter, Noir, Spectre. And I won't explain how to use Zoom because I haven't figured that out yet. There's really an explosion of creativity in these apps, and they come and they go. I mean, Lomob seems to have gone pretty much. Filterstorm was another wonderful app that isn't here anymore. Okay, so you hit the camera app you see on the left side. I'm touching that with my finger. and I hit Photo Library. I'm also touching that with my finger. Tapping is, I think, the operative term. I find the images that I pulled for this, and I'm going to pull up a flower image. Okay. And this is the default drawing. I'm not doing anything. So there you go. It's not bad. Let's see. Let's do the vibrant one, the default vibrant one on this, I think. Let's see what that looks like. Basically, you hit the thumbnail of the choice you want, and yeah, that's better. So I'm saving it off, save to photos. You could, by the way, send it right to Instagram from here if you wanted, or whatever you want to do with it. So now I'm going to open up Image Blender, and one side of Image Blender, I'm going to go and get the thing we just did, like that. And I'm going to tap the little icon on the other side of Image Blender for the original image. I go to Photos, I tap Photos, I go find the webinar album, and I tap the image in the webinar album. And now what I have at the bottom of the Image Blender screen is I have on the left the original image, on the right the Waterlogue image, and in the middle a 50% blend. If I wanted to be more of the Waterlogue, which I probably would in this case, I would go to like about 70%, pull the slider like that, and then I would save the image, save to photos. And if you go back to, and I tapped yes to say start over on a blank project, you don't have to do that. You can leave it there if you want. If you go back to photos, here's the image we just made. You'll notice that it has a kind of 50% border around it, which is kind of a sort of trademark of my Waterlogue converted images. You'll see a lot of them when we go back to the slideshow. Let me pull up an image in Snapseed and show you another side of this world here.
So Harold, the image you just made, it's saving it as a completely new image, or is it saving it over the original image?
It saves it as a completely new image. Thank you for the question. So my suggestion in terms of workflow is that you do and I'm showing a bit of workflow here, is that every time you make a major change to the image, you save back a new version to your photo albums. So that way, if you want to go back and retrace, you can do it. And then if somebody asks you on a webinar 5 years after you made the image, what app you used to make it, you can probably trace that back too. So it's smart to save back each time as part of your workflow. That's what I do. So I'm going to now find my page of mostly apps, and here's Snapseed on the upper left. I'm going to tap Snapseed. It's already got an image in it, but which is one I photographed not so long ago and worked on in Snapseed. But let's open a new image. Open from device. I'm tapping, and here's a Cadillac. I was socially distanced walking the other day and found this Cadillac sitting on the street in Kensington, California, and snapped a quick photo of it. So before I get to what's in here, and there's a tremendous amount in here, let me note the export options. Okay, so I'm going to tap the export button you see at the bottom of the screen. It says export, and there the save a copy is the right choice here. Okay, so The save a copy creates a copy with changes that you can undo. I'm not so concerned about the changes that you can undo, but there's no respect that you're overwriting the original. Okay, so I always click save a copy there. Now, there are looks and tools. Mostly on the prints, a look is a preset. Okay, so there are a bunch of presets here for my Cadillac, and the first thing on my list, I'm scrolling through the list of presets. The first thing on my list is my previous settings. So if I liked what I did, I can do it before. I use some mourning, and you know, that's not bad. And you process the image. You could also multiply these. That structure, faded glow isn't bad. If you've gone too far, you go like that. You go X, and it cancels back out. I'm going to go back and put that morning in. I thought that was pretty cool. And then I go check. Now, the meat of this application is not in these presets. It's in the tools menu, which I hit tools to open up, and you don't see all of it here. You have to scroll down to see all of it. The tune image is a pretty fast and easy way to adjust brightness, highlights, shadows, saturation, the standard kind of things we worry about. There's a curves adjustment here. There's selective adjustments you can do. I would pay attention to glamour glow, tonal contrast, the HDRscape menu, which is fun. You up at the top, there's a bar. You pull it to increase the strength of something. And when you're happy with what you do, you click check. You go back to the tools menu. You can also, black and white is the best black and white conversion that I know on the iPhone apps. And frames are fun because you can add a frame. There are 23 different frame choices. I've shown a bunch of them in my slideshow so far. You use the thing up at the top to set the width of the frame. You know, what might be cool might be this one here, I think. And when you're happy with it, you hit check. So the only way to really learn this app is, of course, to fool around with it and to play with a lot of images. It's like the way you get to Carnegie Hall. The only way to do it is to process. However, before I move back to my slideshow, would people like to ask any questions about this, which maybe I can answer?
All right, I'm waiting for folks to ask questions. There's actually been a couple of folks would like to know how you switch from Photoshop to the iPhone or get the iPhone image into Photoshop on your computer.
You know, there's no one answer to the question of how you navigate between computer and iPhone. It depends in part upon your systems and what you want to do. But email is an easy way, an old-fashioned way to switch images. Anything that comes in as an attachment to your iPhone can be saved to your photos and then worked on, and vice versa. You can send it back to yourself that way. Apple Airdrop is a great way to communicate between devices if that's turned on. And you can read Airdrop coming into your computer directly into the old iPhoto app called Photo these days, which is what I'm doing in my slideshow. There's also a good old-fashioned USB cable connector. Works in several ways. So the answer really is that there are a bunch of ways. Perhaps Airdrop is the single most convenient one, but there are no shortage of ways to move imagery back and forth.
Harold, there's a couple of questions have come in.
Yep.
Carla would like to know, how do you use double exposure in Snapseed?
Yeah, good question. Let's find out. It's the answer. So what you do is you press the little thing with a plus at the bottom and you choose the other exposure that you want. So I have the car in there. What should we make go with the car? Well, what about that that nice orange, oh, how about a cat? A cat would go nicely with a car. So there you go. That's a cat, that's a terrible example, but you get the idea. Bottom line is you plus the button and you do it. You've got controls to dark and light and change the blending mode, and you've got, just like an image blender, an opacity slider, so you can set the opacity of the resulting blend. So basically, I suppose if you use this, and Carla, I will say this is the first time I've actually used that feature in here. You don't need Image Blender. You can just use Snapseed. It seems to do the same thing.
Oh, folks are wondering. Sorry. Folks are wondering where the plus button is.
Yeah, so if you see the bar at the bottom of the Snapseed thing, there's always an X on the left, which is cancel, and a check on the right, which means accept what you've done. The first button to the right of the X is a little thing that shows a picture with mountains in it, I think, and has a little plus icon next to it. So that's the story. I do believe that on some people's screens, you can't see the bottom of the photo, which is a problem, but it's there, you know. And you know, my solution to what's where on the on iPhone apps is just starting to hit buttons and see what happens. It's a very time tested, tried and true way of doing work. The experimental toddler method. You know, to be a little less flippant about it, despite Apple's efforts at standardization, which is truly a mixed bag, the truth is that almost every one of the iPhone apps has different kind of interfaces, and it even is as sort of idiotic as whether you open the Photos app and it's going left to right or right to left. It can drive you crazy because there's no consistency of this stuff. They all have reasonable documentation. A lot of the documentation is YouTube style videos, and you know, it's not really my preference. I prefer manuals, but that shows my generation. So if you're really in doubt about this stuff, it's worth taking a few minutes and going to the vendor's documentation, which usually is linked through the apps also.
And Yukiko has a comment about getting your photos from iPhone into Photoshop. She says, if you have Lightroom, you can sync between desktop and mobile and then take it into your Photoshop.
Right, absolutely. And I did see a question go by about whether I use my iPad for this. And typically the answer is no, I don't. That's not out of principle. There's no good reason why many of these aren't, in fact, even easier to use on the iPad. But the way I work, really, the iPhone is my traveling companion. And it's what I always have with me. And I mostly do this kind of processing when I'm sitting in a train station or bored or something somewhere, or a restaurant. That used to be my life anyhow. Now that my wings have clipped, I don't know. Right, Phyllis?
Right. And Gay has a question. Do you store all your iPhone images in a special place?
Near to my and dear to my heart. Like you are, Phyllis.
Oh, thank you.
No, okay. So yeah, archiving iPhone images is a serious business, particularly as in our case, we make some of our living on them. I tend to be a truster, and as I've said already today, in the Arthur Weasley principle. Really, what I do is I use a mechanism, you know, either Airdrop or a USB cable, to pull every once in a while, before I'm going off someplace too exotic, I pull everything off my iPhone, bulk delete it from my iPhone, and archive it into our system where everything's backed up and on network attached storages as well as locally. That's realistically what I do. This is a waterlogue image from Giverny, made exactly in the way I showed you. 50% the original image, 50% the waterlogue version. And similarly, the Blue Grotto on the island of Malta. A little bit, two versions here, a little bit out of sync. This is looking down in the central Tokyo train station, looking down at people. The old trawler Point Reyes out at Inverness in Inverness, California. A grand old hotel, I think on the Lago di Garda. This is the Pont Valentre in the southwest of France. Part of what I like doing with these images is doing simulated old looks. Some of the dirt came from that program, LowMob, which isn't openable anymore in the US, but some other of the antique effects are from distressed FX and mixtures. This one is that same piece of software that had the oil paint filter in it. Forget what it's called. It's called something. It's called Photolab. This is downtown Valletta on Malta. I took this photo from the balcony of my room with big cameras and so on. Turned out the iPhone image was just more interesting. Reflections in the canal and that goes around Chartres, France. I was asked whether the photos are intentionally blurry, and I think at some level you can give me the benefit of the doubt about that, in the sense that I know a blurry photo when I see it, and I do very high resolution sharp images. So the look is what I'm going for with these, and in no stretch of the imagination do I use an iPhone to be a 60 megapixel camera with a Zeiss lens on it. So yeah, these are intentionally blurry photos. We also you also have to consider that the display via Zoom and your monitor may not be ideal too. In fact, I can bona fidely say they are not. It's not ideal. In terms of what's been successful in the marketplace, a lot of the watercolor look has been for us, but also some of the other kinds of images as well, fairly carefully blown up. This was originally HDR'd via the process I showed you with the moon rising over the Piazza San Marco and people not at all social distancing, which is understandable. And then I put it through Waterlogue. This is Burano, which is one of the out islands of Venice. Camels in the desert via plastic bullet. Camel shadows, I should say. Camels from a camel, the Alhambra in Granada. With this one, the border and the intent here was a Polaroid look. we should all I think there was a question coming by. I only caught it out of the corner of my eye about the lack of people at Giverny. Yeah, we were there. I've been fortunate enough to be there for many years with during the artist hours, and not very many people. But now we should all get to travel, because apparently there's nobody much in all the formerly mob tourist sites. This is, of course, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. This is one of the larger cathedrals in Germany, in Speyer. The great beach in Point Reyes with a Snapseed border on it. Multnomah Falls. I find using the iPhone very liberating. Basically, it's a sketchbook. It's here it is, and I don't have to make this huge production about it. You just do it, and then sometime when I'm sitting around and have nothing to do, it's really better than doing than sort of cruising awful news headlines or something, to just to fool around and see what happens. This one comes from the what's the name of that app? It's that one comes from Mobile Monet. And this is the oil painting filter that I mentioned before. It's a Waterlogue cat. I thought this was interesting because it's basically just an architectural detail, but done as a watercolor. Processed through Snapseed. This is a doctor who liked collecting these bottles. So another example of where you would never get the chance to bring a real camera into here and start playing around with it. But if you're there anyhow, why not? I'm not even sure what this was. This was looking up at a skylight somewhere. So merest abstraction. And up at the Cathedral of St. James in Santiago de Compostela. Down a rural railroad track with horizon lines pointing forever. And here are a couple of train stations, train images. And yeah, I mean, an image like this, of course, is intentionally done to be very kind of old-fashioned. Someone took this out of a plastic camera in the 1940s, maybe, a rural train station in Constantia, Romania. The Oculus in New York City. Here's a back staircase in the Picasso Museum in Paris. Highly recommend the Gigapixel software. Works well. So it's possible to control the shutter speed on your iPhone in a number of ways. This one is via the Slow Shutter Cam app. It's called, let's see, what's it called? Oh,
And when you get a minute, Harold, there's also a couple of questions.
Sure, I'm happy to deal with the questions while I find the name of this app. It's somehow lost in my icons on this thing. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Lorraine would like to know, is there a high key app?
Well, I think you could use Pro Camera for that, because you turn it high key. You could also not explicitly would be the answer, but there's no reason that you can't use a combination of Pro Camera to actually set the exposure and Snapseed's exposure adjustment to do whatever effect you like in post-production. I don't know what happened to slow shutter cam, but I think it's called slow shutter cam anyhow. Find my shortcuts. Anything else, Phyllis, dear?
Yes, can you selectively add parts of an image to another, move it around, so control where the composite or double exposure is?
Absolutely, in a bunch of different apps, but I don't like to do that much because it's like, all right, guys, if I'm going to be doing all that stuff, it's called Slow Shutter, the app I'm looking for. Why not just do it in Photoshop, for God's sakes, or on a big computer where you can actually see what you're doing? But yeah, there are a bunch of apps that allow you to do that, including Snapseed allows selective adjustments. I almost was going to use this one, this waterlog of a bridge in downtown Hanoi as my background. This is right around the corner here. So we're going through a door phase here. Door and public statuary phase. This is Aslan the lion sitting somewhere. This was HDR using the technique that I explained, a house in Sibui in Romania. And the Hotel Zumritter looks like a scary place to stay. My backdrop, a photograph in rural Romania. How abstract can you go? This is like flowers in a restaurant and highly abstract. Well, so here's where I ended up with my Cadillac when I actually posted it. But I sort of like the version we just did in Snapseed better, actually, with stronger morning light coming in. And an old Hudson, wood ornaments. I visited an old friend who lives in rural Maine, and he had all his cars still. This was his first car. This is a rich person's car, processed to look like look antiqued, basically. In a local supermarket parking lot here, we get high class cars in Berkeley. Citroen emblem, Chevy. An old Mercedes, yellow. And just down the block, the point here really is the pattern of interlocking curves and the reflections. This is, again, this is about the composition here. This is looking up at the underside of a boat, hull up, and a bathtub line. These are all Lightbox images that I processed through Waterlogue and through Image Blender. Generally, these would be an afterthought. I'd be spending a fair amount of time making the original Lightbox image, and someone would say to me, "Oh, why don't you do an iPhone of it?" But they come out kind of nice this way. I would say also that there's a reason that these are all pieces rather than the full image, because generally the white part of it doesn't come out as white as when you photograph it with a larger camera and do it on in Photoshop. The oil painting filter that I mentioned. So this is Mextures, background, and distressed FX as well, added in the entire thing put together in Snapseed, a path along a river. Oh, and feathers on a lightbox. It's about one of the straightest images you're likely to see here. another pretty straight image. And a nice distressed background of a slight box image here. So, you know, people laughed at 35 millimeter cameras when they first came out. They called them toys. And that's the sense I have of iconography as well. I don't really like seeing it move to you can be a professional and do sports photography with your iPhone, because I don't really think that's its strength. I think its strength is as a sketchbook and a quick expressive medium that allows one to make images that are here's a little thing that I just saw, basically, like this black white cookie, or this fence down in Furnace Creek in Death Valley, where it's about the black and white or Persit hole covers. This last one along the Camino in Spain, and here it's one in Nara, Japan, where the sacred deer are a big deal. It could be just very casual things, walking along a beach, or a pair of forks, or an unmade bed. And we're going to finish up with some curtains. I have a thing about photographing curtains, processed in various different apps. All right, guys, have fun with your iPhone. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Be creative and stay mighty.